got it. How are you? Do you remember me, Jasmine Bligh?
From the moment that Jasmine Bligh reopened television after the end of the war, outside broadcasts of all kinds became an essential part of every week's programmes. And as techniques improved and new equipment came into service, producers broke all kinds of new ground in their search to bring live pictures to the viewers at home. This series deals with those pioneering days of outside broadcasts. And this first programme is about a particular kind of outside broadcast which took those lucky enough to have television sets into a world of action, excitement and adventure.
I was never slow to take a chance to do something with the Air Force, and as most of us in OBs had been in the Air Force. And we tried earlier, I can't remember, I think it was very early in the 50s, to do a live transmission of pictures from the air at North Weald, and it turned out to be a monumental disaster.
Yes, I remember that well, with the old Bristol freighter. Many years ago now, we had a camera like this one. At the back of the Bristol freighter, I was sort of strapped in and given a parachute. But still, we got some good pictures from the air. We moved across London and looked at all the main points of interest. The problems which we did have on that particular run was more in getting the picture from the plane to the ground.
We had another go, and the idea was that we would try and make it realistic and not just get pictures from the air for nothing. But we went to a station in Norfolk which was one of its main roles was teaching people to fly blind. So we thought that we would show how a pilot was taught to fly, sort of covered up. And on the rehearsal the day before, it all went reasonably well, but come the day, the weather came right down, and it was for real. I mean, it really was a blind landing.
Well, there we are. We're turning now gently, running back towards base, above the overcast, in the beautiful eternal sunshine, which is the world of the airman.
Hello, Jungle 71, John Dean Baxter, are you there? We're now going to start the procedure to call you home and find out...
The outside broadcast crews were very much at home in this kind of environment. Most of them, Peter Dimmock included, had a service background, and the camaraderie of the combined op had carried through into the control van. Even so, television firsts like this were very considerable technical achievements.
1, still 355, cool and steady.
And approaching 3 miles from the runway, your altitude should be passing through 1,100 feet indicated. 100, your heading.
And incidentally, I also remember this program because it was the only occasion on which I, as a commentator, also had control of the picture to which I was talking, because there was no airborne director. There were 2 cameras, as I say, one looking over the pilot's shoulder at the all-important instruments, and my shoulder too, incidentally, and the other camera was locked on in the bomb bay.
And here we come in over the lead-in lights 100 yards apart. We're coming, there's the runway immediately in front of us. There's the white line seen through the bomb bay. Hold off. Main undercarriage, touchdown now. Nose wheel still in the air. Even on that shot you can see how bad the visibility is. And there is the captain's view. Down goes the nose wheel, and down we come straight and true, dead down the center of the runway and dead down the center of the flare path.
We were prepared to take a chance. The engineers felt that it would let down their professional reputation if things went wrong. We said, no, don't worry, the public are with us. If we make mistakes, they are not going to blame you. But I think at that stage, you see, the senior engineers in television, we used to call them the 3 Bs. The 3 Bs were much more worried what the director of engineering at Broadcasting House in radio would say to them, because they saw that possibly their careers within the BBC at that stage might still depend upon promotion back into radio.
Peter Dimmock and his team were a very lively lot with plenty of imagination, and they usually wanted to do more than we could manage, but that was probably a very good way round for things to be. It kept us on our toes, and we were keen enough to follow and to show that we could do what they wanted, but not always quite as quickly. I think in the long run we did it.
But I can remember saying to Bridgewater, soon after we'd done the first static relay from across the channel, which was a tremendous triumph. I wasn't on that, Calais. And I thought, what would be fun to do one on the moving Lord Warden ferry coming in. And I said to Bridgewater, Tony, come on, I want to do this. And Tony said, but we don't know how you do this. You've got the ship's pitching all over the place. I don't know whether you can gyro the transmitter and this, that, and the other. And I said to him, that's your problem, not mine. I booked the ferry in 2 months' time, and McGibbon's given me airtime.
Of course, Bridgewater's engineers rose to the occasion. Barclay Smith was able to drive his entire outside broadcast unit onto this first roll-on, roll-off cross-channel ferry at Boulogne. And to the strains of the local fire brigade band, they set sail for England, transmitting these live pictures as they went. But with all live transmissions, the unexpected can suddenly happen, and one glance across the harbour bar prepared viewers and the television crew for a rough ride ahead.
So now we come to the entrance, and we are now beginning to rise and fall to meet the swell. On the bridge, everybody, including the captain, has suddenly been soaked to the skin. I don't know for the moment whether you can hear what I'm saying on this microphone. I wonder if someone will tell me whether I am at the moment audible.
As a seasick Richard Dimbleby valiantly carried on with his commentary, he was unaware that the same wave had knocked over one of the cameras on the deck and its cameraman.
We shifted right on the bridge.
The ship just seemed to go haywire. We took a dive, came up again, and we just got practically washed off the side. The camera got washed over, I got pinned under the camera. Terrific hullabaloo going on while all this happened, but we did pick the camera up and we carried on.
From the elements out here and get ourselves straight, because fortunately Barry Edgar, who is with us aboard, is down below somewhere in the ship, and he can talk to some others who are experiencing what we're experiencing. So from the bridge and from the deck over to below.
I also remember interviewing a Continental coach driver, and he talked about going through Italy and crossing the Alps and one thing or another in his coach, and we were staggering from side to side trying to keep our feet, and I saw him going greener and greener and paler.
We couldn't get through the St. Gothard Pass, through rains.
Look, Mr. Hicks, I think I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think the best thing we can do is to sit down before we fall down and hand back upstairs to Richard Dimbleby. Right?
And with great relief, they cut away from us, and he just shot over to the side of the ship. But it was a very memorable occasion.
And some observer who came into the control room with me, which had been built into the centre of the ship, said, oh my God, this is awful, oughtn't we to come off the air? Now, I'm a coward, totally physical coward at heart, but I intuit what television's about, and I said, don't be a bloody fool, this is exactly what we want, and if we can lose a second camera, I don't mind as long as it's in sight of the third.
We thought we paid great attention to this live element. Sometimes I look back and I think perhaps we allowed it to dominate us to the point where we might have made better programs if we hadn't have been afraid of inserting the odd film sequence.
Presiding over this go-getting bunch of producers with an intelligence and integrity that commanded everyone's respect was Seymour Joly de La Binière, known to them all as Lobby.
And I think it was also part of this business of what we also called actuality, to persuade the viewer that he really was on the spot, that this wasn't something that had been recorded before and maybe edited and cleaned up and then put out to him when it happened to be a convenient time for him to view. That, fortunately, is possible as well from the result of the original actuality. But, and of course from films anyhow, but this seemed to us desperately important, and we were wanting to persuade people that they really were there.
You must remember that this was historically a repeat of the situation in radio from 23 or 4 years earlier. Then, the radio hadn't been able to do what it wanted to do because of the intransigence of the Luddites in show business. And it was exactly the same with television 23 years later, so they had to invent their own programs. This is why all those. Another reason for the rise of the live outside broadcast, which was just a created piece of television. Very successful. I suppose the most successful series of that kind was a thing called Saturday Night Out.
Outside broadcast. We're starting now.
To start with, there were two lunatics in charge of it. Peter Webber, who had all the crazy ideas, and Derek Bunell Davis, who had all the crazy solutions. He was actually the producer. And between the pair of them, they cooked up this incredible series of live programs. The whole object really was that at the time, recording was becoming the thing in television. We all know that today 90% of programs that aren't sport or current affairs are either on film or recordings, and Lobby said, look, we must have live outside broadcast, and that's how it was born.
Well, the criteria were that it had to be a very good event which would stand live coverage for half an hour on a Saturday night. 7 o'clock on a Saturday night is quite a time to fill. So we searched the country, and we put these ideas up. But the trouble was, we hadn't got enough units to go very often to the places where the programs were. We'd say, we want to be at Hull, there's a marvellous thing happening. And our planners would say, well, you can't go to Hull, you'll have to go to Bristol, because that's where a unit is. So then we'd have to go to Bristol and find something.
Stand by.
Good evening, and as you join us tonight, once again, Saturday Night Out makes television history with this live outside broadcast picture you see now. Yes, it's helicopter to helicopter. Your first view through our new BBC Flying Eye. In this case, mounted in a Westland Whirlwind S-55 helicopter as we hover at 800 feet or so over the southern beaches of that popular West Country resort, Weston-super-Mare.
Peter had so many ideas for things, most of which were about 10 years in advance of his time and our equipment. But I suppose he did jolly them on a lot, and we got all sorts of things. It was a very exciting program to do because you were never quite sure whether you were going to get away with it. Peter Webber organized the embarkation of a complete outside broadcast unit in the Dover lifeboat. As it was, we got some fairly lively weather in the Channel. And from the program point of view, I think the best thing we did was to go out to the South Goodwin Lightship and put a television set on board, which was their first television. We went out with one big camera anchored to the stern of the lifeboat, a generator for generating lights because it was at night time. And the skipper of this thing said, well, that's all right, Nick. He said, but if that turn over, he said, that's going to act like a keel. He said, we should never be a self-righting boat again, which cheered us all up no end.
John Walker's really displaying his boatmanship coming alongside here.
Head starboard. Head starboard.
Giving his commands to his two mechanics, each of whom operate their separate engines. Now we're coming alongside her. There she is, the South Goodwin Lightship. Little ship in a big sea, only 200 tons of her. There's Alf Perry throwing the line there, one of the two seamen on watch.
Well, there we were, alongside each other, the two ships grating against each other in a very high sea. And the thing to do was to try and time yourself in your leap when the two decks were together for about 3 seconds, which I managed to do, ably shoved by one of the crew members.
And now, first thing to go, Sampson takes the camera. Cameraman. Brian, the leading Ronnie Pantlin, the stage managers, and I'm going to take my microphone and follow on Captain Parkins. Captain Parkins, take the mic. Have it. Thanks a lot, that was fun, wasn't it? Take the mic.
Then, of course, was the dreadful business of getting this television set on board. And I clambered up, and there was this fellow, I think his name was Sampson, he must have been, because he was a huge man. And he got this set like a box of chocolates in his hand, and he kept passing me, and I kept having a go and missing it. He got fed up in the end. As it came up, he said, "Yeah." And that's when I was going in the Ogden. And two brave men clutched me by the belt and heaved me inboard. The only trouble was all my back muscles popped. And I was walking about like the hunchback of Notre Dame for a couple of days after that. And I got it in and down to the saloon in one jump. I often wondered whether the set ever did work after that.
I give you 3 guesses what it is, Jock. Whoops. Don't think so. Aubrey, what do you think it is?
Me, I should say it's a new wireless.
Oh, new wireless. It isn't a wireless quite, actually.
Getting hot.
There we are. There she is. Well, now, Captain Parkins, take the microphone and say your party, please.
On behalf of the good people of Ramsgate, we'd like to present you with this television set and hope that it will certainly relieve some of your loneliness and worries out here.
It certainly will. Thank you, Captain Parkins.
Well, there we are. And there's the people of Ramsgate are very anxious that you should know that they're sending some technicians out to rig it up before Christmas.
And thank the people of Ramsgate on our behalf.
Well, do that. When you've done it yourself, they're watching, of course.
The first show from a submarine was in a Saturday night out program. I did several submarine trips, but the first one, which I can recall being a pretty, I won't say dangerous, but it was very unusual for someone who'd spent the war up aloft to be down below.
For the first time ever, you are looking in the control room of a British submarine 40 feet under the surface of the English Channel. Her commanding officer, Commander Higgins, is at the periscope looking at the sea and the surface of the sea above him. This picture comes direct from the inside of a submarine. And this is what Commander Higgins can see through his periscope. You now are looking through the periscope yourselves. And there in the distance is Her Majesty's frigate Grenville.
I am 10 degrees on his starboard bow.
Captain, may I interrupt for a moment?
Certainly.
What is the situation, sir?
The situation is the attack has just started, and it should take about 12 minutes from now.
Do you think you're well placed for the attack?
Well, we can't tell yet. It depends how he alters course.
Right, well, we'll get out of the way, but we'll be back later on. And now I'm going to go forward again, continuing our quick tour of the ship. And here we are in what is normally the ERA's mess, but which has been taken over by us as our control room. There's Dennis Munger in the center talking to his cameraman, the producer aboard, and up nearest to us is Jimmy Moon, the technician responsible for our presence here at all, who's been working like a Trojan.
It was carried out with one normal camera, which was up in the forward torpedo compartment, 2 experimental cameras, which we had in the control room, one of which was looking through the periscope, the other periscope, of course, being used for the aerials, antennas, which allowed us to run at periscope depth. And the third camera was on a monopod and operated by a very old friend of mine, another ex-aircrew guy, Bill Wright, who subsequently became the producer of Mastermind.
From live pictures beneath the sea to a transmission from the top of a mountain, an outside broadcast camera and commentator Winford Vaughan Thomas rode on the Snowdon Mountain Railway.
This is the last of the little cuttings before we turn the bend and the summit's in sight. And there you see it, with our cameraman perched on the very summit, on his special stand. He must be undoubtedly the highest man at the moment in southern Britain.
But this, in fact, was not a live transmission. That had to be abandoned because the summit was covered in cloud. But the outside broadcast unit stayed on the mountain and recorded these pictures the next day to be shown later. The following year, under a new title, Now, the same team continued to take their cameras live to the most unlikely places. In this case, to the top of the Forth Bridge.
If you were in that man's shoes, you would be, at this moment, 360 feet above the Firth of Forth, with a sheer drop down either side of that girder to the waters below. The girder, as you can see, knobbly with rivets, often wet with rain. And if you want to know how wide the girder is, well, just measure off in your drawing room 2.5 feet. That's the girder. There on the right hand of those two twin top points of the cantilever is our top camera position. If you could climb up to the top of St. Paul's, to the top of the cross, you would not be as high as those two chaps, the cameraman and Jameson Clark. Carl Bell. William Bell.
At the Royal Navy's submarine training school at Gosport, commentator Bob Danvers Walker found that the only way to escape was up through 100 feet of water.
Right, this is my moment of truth now. Remember, all the way up, breathe out. Ready?
Swim boys in attendance. They're at the bottom,
Yes,
aren't they?
they're standing by the hatch to hold Danvers Walker, just to make certain that
There he
he
is.
breathes out correctly. And there he blows out. And there are the bubbles, and they release him. Give him a quick spin to steer him up, and he's going
80
past
feet.
80 feet. 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, and here he comes up, 10 feet and splash.
Well done, Bob. Come on, this way, old man. Okay. This way. Jolly well done. Congratulations. Come on out.
Thanks very
Take your
much.
nose clip off.
We could never have done the things in outside broadcast if we hadn't been a team. We talk about our little internal squabbles with the engineers, that we're always pushing them. But the fact remained that when the chips were down, and particularly after competition arrived, which was the healthiest thing to happen to any of us, because we couldn't be complacent, was this tremendous team spirit from the very bottom. You know, where I began as a stage manager on the production side or as a junior engineer, right up to the bosses. In outside broadcast, we had one objective, and that was to be the best.
Continuing television's close links with the services, 3 major programs were mounted with the Army, the Navy and the Air Force. They were what Peter Dimmock called the hammer blows of outside broadcasts. Each program lasted for more than an hour, and each involved 5 outside broadcast units all over the country, all contributing sequences. They weren't just action programs, they were live documentaries about the role of the armed services at that time, the manpower, the equipment, and the state of readiness. Now and Saturday Night Out didn't always send their men with the mic adventuring. They also covered live events like show jumping, circuses, and the last night of the proms, events which still feature in the calendar of outside broadcasting. But more than anything else, Now and Saturday Night Out are remembered for the simple, brilliant, crazy idea that kept viewers glued to their seats, like the live outside broadcast one night in 1957 from the Longmoor Military Railway.
Merlin, of the King Arthur class. Merlin was born in 1919 and was retired from service in 1955.
Ah, well, this really was Peter Weber at his best. We hadn't got anything that we could find happening, so we thought we must make something happen on this particular date. So Peter went off to British Railways and said, could he buy an engine? And they said, well, we've got a so-and-so class engine, enormous engine, which they're just putting down for scrap. And they said, you can have that for the price of the coal to get it to where you want to, and you must pay the driver. Then he went down to the Royal Engineers at Longmoor and said, how would you like to have a real train crash to practice on? And I could lay all this on for you. And they said, how blooming marvellous.
Okay, driver, take her away. You won't forget to jump off, driver.
I'll jump on it.
A mile further down the same track. Now here, in a sense, is the spot marked X where the accident will happen, where demolition charges have been laid. The train wreckers are behind the crest with two men with automatic weapons giving covering fire. Now where is the train? It's not the coal that's making it tremble, it's the excitement here. It's terrific. Now out of that belt of timber in the background comes engine number 30740 and three coaches belting down the track to meet their end in a mighty crash over the embankment. Nearly 200 tons traveling at 45 miles an hour and unmanned. They've lashed the whistle down. They've lashed the whistle down and you'll hear her coming down there. Down she comes, closing the gap to where the Royal Engineer sappers have laid their trap. See that smoke? Here she comes. A line to be buckled and wrecked by high explosive, which will send her hurtling down the 30-foot slope into a snow and ice-covered marsh. Here she comes, vivid realism that brings to life those dramatic stories of special service and commando raids of the war. Now here is high drama in real life. It's terrifying. Now anything can happen in the final holocaust of twisted and torn metal. You've never seen anything like this before on your television. Now watch. What a grand old lady. Still on her legs. Well, you've got to take your hat off to her. Great heavens, what a fantastic sight. Still blowing a whistle.
Well, once again, Saturday Night Out has shown you things happen as they happen, when they happen, and where they happen.